On a quiet afternoon, under the shadow of a weathered courthouse, Darius Gentry raised his hand and did what no one else dared. He bought a cabin and 12 acres of land for just 25 cents. It should have been the deal of a lifetime, the kind of bargain men bragged about for years, yet the crowd didn't cheer or groan at being outbid. They just stood still, watching him with an unsettling mix of silence and pity, as though they'd witnessed a man sign away his future instead of striking gold. The auctioneer's gavel cracked against the block, but the sound felt hollow, almost reluctant. That was when an old woman, Willa Blaine, tugged at her shawl and whispered, "You don't want that place, son. Trust me." Before Darius could answer, it was too late. The cabin was his, and so was the secret no one in town dared to speak of. The cabin stood crooked and tired, its walls sagging against decades of neglect. To most, it was worth less than firewood, but to Darius it carried the thrill of ownership, even at the absurd price of 25 cents. As he pushed open the creaking door, the air inside hit him damp, stale, and oddly heavy. A rusted stove sat in one corner, a table scarred with knife marks in another. Dust hung in the beams of fading light like suspended time. Then, at the center of the room, Darius noticed something strange. The planks didn't quite line up. Kneeling, he traced the faint seams of a square outline, its edges hammered shut with heavy iron nails. A trapdoor sealed and sealed deliberately. Whoever had lived here had wanted whatever was beneath to stay hidden. His curiosity flared, but so did unease. As he stepped back, a prickle ran up his neck. Through the grimy window he spotted movement. At the edge of the clearing, a tall figure in a silver hat stood still, watching. No words, no gestures, only silence. And then, as suddenly as he appeared, the man melted back into the trees. Darius lingered only minutes longer before saddling his horse. Riding back into town, the cabin no longer felt like a bargain. It felt like an inheritance of secrets, with a shadow already following him. Word traveled fast in a small town. By the time Darius returned, whispers about the 25-cent cabin buzzed through the saloon like hornets. It wasn't long before Fletcher, a well-fed trader with shifty eyes, cornered him. Fletcher smiled wide, laying 5 crisp $100 bills on the table. "I'll take it off your hands," he said smoothly. No questions asked. It was tempting. $500 for something he barely owned for a day? But the offer came too quickly, too eagerly. Darius shook his head, unsettled by the pressure. That's when Tobias Crow, a sharp-tongued lawyer with a knack for intimidation, leaned in from the crowd. "It's not about the land, Gentry," he said, voice low. "It's about what's under the floor." The saloon went quiet. Eyes darted to Darius, then back to their drinks. Some folks shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided looking at him at all. The tension was undeniable. Clearly, the sealed trapdoor wasn't a secret. It was a warning everyone else already understood. Darius left with a storm in his gut. The cabin, the nails, the watcher in the woods, now Fletcher's bribe and Tobias's veiled threat. Whatever he'd stepped into wasn't just personal curiosity. It was a collision course with forces that wanted him out or silenced. Darius found answers not from the men who threatened him, but from an old woman who had nothing left to fear. Willa Blaine had seen decades of scandal play out in that town, and her eyes carried the weariness of someone who had buried too many truths. She told him about Samuel Hartwell, the previous owner of the cabin, a man who had discovered evidence of fraud, land theft, and bribery reaching higher than anyone dared to speak. Hartwell never got the chance to expose it. One night, he vanished, and weeks later, his body was found at the edge of the river. His death was ruled an accident, but Willa's voice hardened as she whispered, "Everyone knew better." Before his murder, Hartwell had hidden documents papers that proved corruption at the highest levels. Blackmail, payoffs, forged deeds, the kind of evidence that could ruin powerful men, the kind of evidence worth killing for. Darius sat back, the weight of it sinking in. The sealed trapdoor wasn't just an oddity, it was a vault. And his 25-cent purchase had made him the accidental guardian of something far bigger than land. For the first time, the picture came into focus. Fletcher's offer, Tobias's warning, the silent watcher. They weren't after a shack in the woods, they were after what Hartwell had died protecting. And now, the secret was in Darius's hands. The night Darius pried open the trapdoor, the air inside the cabin shifted like it had been holding its breath for years. Beneath the floorboards lay a tin lockbox, rusted but intact. Inside were stacks of papers, deeds, letters, receipts, evidence of a conspiracy stretching from the courthouse to the governor's mansion. When Judge Crane, a figure of authority Darius thought untouchable, saw the documents, his mask cracked. Hands trembling, Crane admitted his part in the cover-up. He had been pressured, threatened, and ultimately bound into silence by men who controlled the state from the shadows. And at the top of it all, the governor himself. His signature scattered across fraudulent deeds and hidden payoffs. The revelation was explosive. With the documents, Darius held the leverage to topple an empire of corruption, but it also painted a target on his back. Powerful men don't surrender quietly, and they would come for him, for Willa, even for Crane, if he dared to switch sides. Suddenly, Darius wasn't just the curious newcomer who bought a shack on a whim. He was the hinge upon which justice might finally turn or collapse. And with every page he held, the danger grew sharper. The storm broke quickly. Darius, Willa, and Judge Crane had no choice but to flee, as hired guns poured into town, searching for the documents. Their only path out was the abandoned mining trail, a jagged cut through the hills that offered cover and danger in equal measure. Hooves thundered on gravel as bullets ricocheted off rock. Darius gripped the lockbox to his chest, knowing it was more valuable than gold. Behind them, the silver-hatted watcher reappeared, no longer a shadow, but the lead hound in pursuit. When they reached the cabin, the choice was clear. The trapdoor had to be opened in full, the hidden cache revealed. Inside, more than papers waited maps of stolen land deals, ledgers of payoffs, all damning proof of the empire's rot. Cornered, Darius faced the mercenaries in a tense standoff. Guns leveled, the night split by torchlight. Negotiation under threat one side, demanding silence, the other clinging to truth. In that moment, the cabin became a crucible, testing whether a man with nothing more than stubborn resolve could hold against a machine built on lies. The documents made their way into the right hands. Within weeks, indictments spread like wildfire. Judges resigned in disgrace, the governor was stripped of power, and the old network of corruption crumbled piece by piece. What began in a forgotten shack ended in headlines across the state. For Darius, it was surreal. He hadn't sought heroism, only a piece of land. Yet his 25-cent gamble had pulled him into a battle far larger than himself. The town that once looked at him with suspicion now nodded with respect. The cabin itself remained, weathered and scarred, but no longer forgotten. It became a symbol, not of decay, but of resilience. A reminder that truth, no matter how deeply nailed shut, cannot stay buried forever. Darius Gentry walked away, changed. Not wealthy, not powerful, but marked by a legacy he never intended. The cabin he bought for pocket change had become, in the eyes of many, a cornerstone of justice. And in the quiet moments he knew, that was worth more than all the offers in the world. In the end, Darius Gentry's story is more than the tale of a man who bought a cabin for just 25 cents. It is the journey of someone who stepped into the unknown, followed the threads of secrecy, and uncovered corruption powerful enough to shake an entire territory. What began as a bargain quickly became a calling, and Darius transformed from an unsuspecting rancher into a reluctant hero who stood up for what was right when others turned away. His cabin, once dismissed as worthless, became a symbol of justice, proof that real value isn't measured in dollars, but in courage and conviction. And perhaps that's the lesson we're left with. It doesn't take wealth to change history, only the will to act. If you believe in stories where ordinary people make extraordinary choices, subscribe to this channel and join us for the next journey.